and welcome back to Just Code It. Today we're going to take a bit of a detour and take a look at Pydantic because it's used all throughout FastAPI. And I just wanted to do a quick episode or a quick video on how Pydantic works, just generally before we get to how it works alongside FastAPI. If you've never used Pydantic directly, you've definitely used a package that relies on it with over 8,000 packages using Pydantic in their backend. Pydantic is a widely used data validation package. When using Pydantic, it benefits you with giving your IDE the ability to do autocomplete and type hinting, data validation, and then JSON serialization. Enough about that though, let's just get into it. To use Pydantic, you do from Pydantic import base model. That's what you're going to use to make most models. And a model's like a schema in a database. So you're giving a variable name and then the type of it. So we're going to create a class called user. So the table name, it's going to inherit from base model. And then we're going to define the ID, name, email, and password. And all of them are strings except for the ID. Now let's see how we can then access that model or initialize it, however you want to call it. So we're going to do user equals user capital U, and then pass it the ID, a name, an email, and then a password. Or, and if we just print off of there, you can also create an instance of a Pydantic model by passing it a dictionary with all the variable names and the values, and then unpacking it when you pass it to the class name, as you see here. If we just go down and print again, we'll see we got two instances of that class, but we just overwrote them. Next up is accessing attributes. So it's just the user and then the annotation. Pretty simple. We've all done it before. After that, we're going to go look at default values. So if you want to assign a default value to a variable within the model, you can do it by doing we're basically taking the same model as above, but we're just assigning bio, a string, and then we're just going to give it a default bio string. And then if we get rid of it within our instantiation of the class, nothing happens. But if we were to get rid of password, we would get the missing a value error because the field is required and it is missing. We're going to just throw that back in there. After that, we have type annotations. So this is using unions, optional lists, things like that to basically construct these type definitions of each of these variables. So for instance, this skill, we're going to have multiple skills. So it's going to be a list of strings. So we can nestle them inside of each other like that. And then we're setting it equal to just an empty string. We could get rid of that, but then you would have to pass it a string. After that, we have age. Age is optional and is an int. And then we're going to set its default value to none. It's going to start out with being none and optional. So you won't need to use it. And then if you assign the value, it has to be an int. Now there's a spin-off to that where it's a union. So a union basically says it can be a string or a none. Here we're using it to do a middle name and we're setting it to none. So we're not defining it basically, but it can also be a string. This can be better used if you want to do something like a balance can be an integer or a float. That's a good use case. But it can be either or. Now, when you start grouping these together, it can get interesting and it's pretty powerful. What hobbies is an optional list of strings. I know that's a mouthful, but its default value is none. If you don't define it, it doesn't really matter. It's optional. And then if you do pass it anything, it better be a list of strings, which you can see down here. We have Python and Django. Finally, we have friends, and I couldn't really think of a good one for this, so I'm doing a list of unions. So it's going to be a list of something having to be either a string or an integer. And it's not the best use case, but as you can see down here, we can define it as a list of either an integer, which we have there, or a string. Now, if we run this, we should not get any errors. Yep. And then if we get rid of if we change this to a float, oh wait, we should change that. It will give us a value error because it is not an integer. Or if we just don't define middle name, nothing will happen because it's optional, things like that. After type annotation, we're going to take a look at nestled models, or inheriting basically from models. This is extremely powerful. If you've ever taken a database class, it should be ringing bells, but it's basically you're going to be inheriting from other models to build up these structures. A good way to illustrate it is let me just copy this down here real quick. We're going to copy down user because we're just going to reuse it, and I don't feel like scrolling back up. Okay, so for a nestled one, we can define user, which inherits from base model, has those things. And then a post needs a user attached to it. So therefore, we can do inside the post, we have a user and it inherits from user. So basically, when we create this instance, it will attach a user instance to it. And we either have to define a new one or just pass it the one that we already had, which is what we're going to do. We're going to pass it this user, which is probably going to cause an error actually. So we'll see that right now. Yep. So the reason that caused an error is because up here we have user set to this longer instance of the user and we haven't overwritten it yet. So the user variable is defined up here with this object, but down here we redefine what user is, but we didn't redefine the user variable. So if we wanted to do that, let's just get rid of this. And as you can see, it creates a user and it has all the attributes of not just post, but also the user because it inherits everything from it. Another large part of Pydantic is data validation. It's honestly probably the biggest part, considering it's a data validator. Pydantic has a bunch of built-in validators that are very good to use. So before you ever create your own validator, I would go check their website. They have a ton. We're just going to do one real quick, email, because everybody uses that one. They have all these just built in, which I can see some good ones just off the top of my head, secret, and then path and stuff like that. But they also have these network types, which are, you have to do an install for some of them. Actually, the email one, I'm pretty sure is a network type. Yep, email string. And then you do pip install email validator. I should have probably put that in the notes. Yeah, you do pip install email validator to get it installed, and then you can use it. You can also do email name and have it defined as that. There's just a bunch of different validators, so you don't have to recreate the wheel on this. Really, the only validations that you should be doing are super specific validations for your use case. You shouldn't really ever be doing like a check to see if the zip codes are right or things like that. Someone's probably done it before and just look it up. After we get done with creating that model with the string, we run it. And as you can see, it goes through. And if we get rid of the @ sign, it'll error out, giving us a validation error saying it's not an email. Add it back and everything works just fine. We don't need this anymore. After the built-in validators, we're going to take a look at some of these field validators. There's a couple specific ones. We have the before validator that validates the data before any of the inner validation happens, so before it checks its type or anything like that. We have the after validator, which does it afterwards, and then we have the wrap, which does it on either end. Now, to just disregard these methods for a second. So like I was saying, the before validator runs first before any other validations. It's good for cleaning and data and pre-processing of the data. So let's say for our example up here, we're doing clean name, and you would basically just strip the name of any leading and trailing white spaces. You can add some more in there if you want, but it's a pretty simple one. And then to apply it, you use this annotated and then the brackets with string, which is the data type, and then before validator, and then the clean name passed into it. And this is the same for all of them. It's the data type that it needs back, and then the validator you're using. Sorry, I just realized that I messed that up and I had those in the two wrong spots. All right, so we have the after validator here, which is the password, which actually makes sense. And we're going to hash the password as the final step before everything else is done. To do that, we're using that annotated again string, and then we're going to do the after validator and then pass it the method we defined, which is up here, and it just hashes the password and returns back the hashed password. Finally, we have the wrapped validator. It runs throughout on either end of the validation. And this is great for logging and keeping track of what's going on. So you can have a start validation and end validation to make sure everything is still there. You haven't lost any data. Wrap up your process. Here we're going to just create another user and then just print it out with this update. As you can see, I added some trailing and leading white spaces. We're going to keep the email the same, and then this is going to come back as a hashed password. Wow, beautiful. That's it for today with Pydantic. I know we didn't cover anything with FastAPI, but I just wanted to cover Pydantic, and then what we're going to do next is create a blog. From here on out, we're going to start building on what we've been working on, and we're going to, by the end of this, have a blog using our Pydantic. So I wanted to get a good foundation here so we know what everything is doing. And then the next episode or the next video, we'll start building the model for that blog. You can see I already started getting you thinking about users and posts and stuff in this one, but then we're going to build it all out. And then going forward, we're going to just keep adding components to it till the end where we'll have a complete blog website. I hope you enjoyed that. Leave any comments with anything you would like me to cover next. And I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time.